G'day and kia ora everyone, I'm Major from 2D3 and today I have some catching up to do with you. It's been a minute and I'm really excited to sit down and talk about your army and other armies as well, of course. In today's episode of A Meta in Time, we take a 1,000-foot view of your army and how it's fared throughout this GHB edition, looking at recent changes they may have gotten in the Broken Realm series and perhaps make a few predictions or say a few prayers on where we would like to see it land in the upcoming new edition of Age of Sigmar. Now, before we do that, if you like what I do and would like to see more, please do consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is in the description below and even the smallest amount can help. Failing that, the best way to support this channel is by subscribing to it. Like this video, share it on social media, you know the drill. Without you guys and girls, I'm just an old man talking to a screen. Well, I'll still be that anyway, but at least a well-supported one, right? Anyway, hit that subscribe button, done. Good. Now give it a like and let's get on with the show. Today's focus will be all armies at the bottom tier working up into the lower fat middle. So stick around and see if your army is in here. In the next episodes we will cover the upper fat middle and top tier armies as well. This should give you a decent idea as to the state of play of your competitors or yourself if one of these armies is yours. So we'll be looking at armies from across all factions and allegiances using data from events around the world. This data is all thanks to AOS ListBot, a super handy tool for comparing your lists to others and much more. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. It's also important to note that win rates and other stats can differ from country to country, state to state, that sort of thing. So what we are looking at today is thanks to the collation of data from events over the dice rolling globe or from all over the top side of the coin for all those flat earthers out there. This is preferred as oftentimes the more data you have to work with, the more accurate you can be with your results. So, let's start at the very bottom of the ladder with an army that has struggled for a while now but will hopefully see a lot better numbers in the upcoming 3rd edition of AOS with the release of their cousins from the swamp, the Cruel Boys. That's right, currently sitting at the bottom of D tier, it's the Bonesplitters. This awesomely themed army with endless legendary paint schemes posted across the internet has struggled a fair bit over the past 12 months to stay competitive in the meta. It is currently sitting at a win rate of 38% and a popularity of just 1%, which isn't because of the army itself, because it's super cool, but likely a representation of its functionality, leaving competitive players lacking a reason to take them and try to win events. Other players currently only have a 4% chance to face Bonesplitters at events, with only a small handful of events recording a Bonesplitters podium finish. These stats unfortunately haven't changed much for these lads with this edition, not bringing them the love that the boys deserved. Hold that wooden spoon proud though. Sylvaneth haven't seen that much more luck than Bonesplitters in this edition. Their overall win rate for GHB 20 currently sits at 38%, 2% popularity, which I think is nuts considering how awesome this army looks on the table and how many simply stunning paint jobs I've seen out there. Then I remember Trypophobia triggering Drycha, Hammerdreth, and it all makes sense. Paint doesn't matter in the competitive meta, however, and it's been on struggle street for most of the edition except for the June-July months of 2020 where the win rate spiked to over 50% for a short time. As far as the future is concerned, the army scored a new tome, trees and spells as well with it in July 2019, but has remained fairly stagnant since. That is until the recent events in the Broken Realm series, Kragnos being the most recent one. Alariel, the Everqueen, goddess of life magic, a model so brutally ignored that even lovers of her will quickly tell you she costs too much to put into a list and does little to justify that cost. Well, she's finally gotten a bit of TLC. Increased performance on her ranged attack, making it more solid shot. Talent of Dwindling, getting a power increase should you get lucky. A far more reliable and power up to living battering ram. Boost to Life Bloom and a small improvement to Metamorphosis have seen her look a lot more appealing for the 600 points she will set you back in a list. Except, well, Now she'll cost you 740 points. So she basically landed where she started. Cool abilities, now improved hitting power and survivability of course, but overcosted for what her output capabilities are. GW should have left this one at 600, maybe 640 max. Shame GW, shame. The newest model for this army, soon to hit tables, is the Warsong Revenant, with Alariel basically a no-go currently. Who knows, maybe 740 is cheap in the new edition, coming soon, but don't hold your breath. Hopefully we can scrape things back with this great looking fella. A weird mix of wizard and warrior, his profile seems to leave you wondering what you should do with him primarily. The 5-up save makes me think combat is not the best option. But that 4-up after save says it's still possible. But his attack profile itself is nothing encouraging enough to throw him into the fray and think he'll be alright. That said, do yourself a favour and stay out of combat if you have this bloke when you can. He is definitely a support caster first and foremost, with bravery buffs for all within 12 inches and neg for enemies. His situational buff to casting assists you with his Unleash Swarm of Spite spell, going off on a 6 instead of a 7, where you roll a number of dice equal to whatever your casting roll was, and 5s or higher are a mortal wound to all units within 9 inches of him. Some might say this is still underwhelming for his point cost. Beautifully designed model, but missed the mark with War Scroll design in my opinion. Awaken Wildwood's got both better and worse at the same time. You won't damage casters near them anymore when they cast, just when they rock up to it, and changes to how the model's line of sight mechanics operate, which isn't important really until you realise that Sylvaneth can see right through them now without being seen back. This means you can really make use of line of sight shenanigans moving forward. There was a War Scroll battalion as well, Drycha's Spite Grove. The buffs it gives to Rend on Spite Revenants means you're paying points for a buff GW should have given this unit by default a while ago to make them more competitive with their brothers, the Kurnoth Hunters, and further help an army that already is less than ideal in the Rend department. Will this even be legal in competitive matches in 3rd edition? Well, rumour says no. Overall, I think this army might see a slightly better tier rating in 3rd edition with a few touch-ups and an FAQ, or even a decent tome update. Skaven came in with a win rate of 39% and a popularity of 4%, which doesn't seem accurate compared to my own local meta, but understandable at the same time overall. The army has spiked up and down over the past 12 months, getting a win rate as high as 44% in July 2020, and you'll currently have a 22% chance of facing them at a tournament boasting a 2% podium finish over all recorded events. Not much has been heard of regarding these blokes, but I do believe that, as always, they'll chew their way into trouble in the upcoming lore and spill over onto the tabletop as a result, which is exactly what's happening at the moment with Broken Realms, which has so far seen players getting a new battalion, complete with a new battle trait for all Skaven-tied armies, which functions similar to the new one Beasts of Chaos got. It makes your hero a named character and buffs him a bit, as well as buffing the Storm Fiends that are with him, which all hinges on a Skaven general managing to keep a 5-wound rat named hero alive for the duration of a game. More about that battle trait though. It's called the Hidden Weapons Teams, and it won't be making any drastic changes to the army's potential on the tabletop, but it's thematic and plays on the theme of Skaven. Hardcore. The short version is you can deploy a weapons team, so keyword weapons team, inside another unit that has 10 or more models. Then at the start of the shooting or end of the charge phase, you can have that unit pop up. So what you want to do is grab a big blob of clan rats and sneak some warp fire throwers in there. Deploy, laugh in Skaven, repeat. Clan Molder also got some decent improvements to their faction trait, and the monster traits are worth looking into deeper perhaps. I think the future is bright for Skaven players in 3rd edition when it boasts such a wide range of S-tier units such as Clan Rats, Plague Monks, Grey Seer on Screaming Bells, Storm Fiends and Warlock Bombardiers. What this army lacks in bravery, smarts, brawn and shooting, compared to other more shooting focused factions, it makes up for in bodies, mortal wounds, and shenanigans with more to spare. Upwards we go into D tier, to Nighthaunt. Currently a win rate of 40%, popularity 2%, and a 10% chance for generals to face them at tourneys. It's going to be interesting to see how this faction lives beside the new replacement for Legions of Nagash, the Soulblight Gravelords, and if it will have any impact on the Nighthaunts on placing in the meta. Despite these figures, it's actually in a much better position as an army than it found itself in this time last year. The Nighthaunt win rate dropped as low as 25% in July of 2020, where it slowly continued to climb to and eventually settle to plateau at the start of 2021. It remains this way today. Nighthaunt is one of those factions that genuinely has great aesthetics and synergies within its own forces and could greatly benefit from just a few changes here and there. With the rumoured removal of Battletome battalions from competitive play in 3rd edition, this army could be well positioned to move up into that fat middle tier thanks to its ability to function well without the need for battalions in the first place. I did a faction focus on this army that I would suggest all Nighthaunt players check out, which I will leave in the video description below. Above these are the cute guys you'd never invite over for a barbecue, the Gloomspite Gitz. First up, I love this army. It's a glass cannon that just keeps giving. Everything except for consistent tournament wins, that is. A respectable win rate of 43%, popularity of 2% in line with most D tier ranked armies, and a 13% chance to see this army on your table at an event. Whereas the previously mentioned Nighthaunt have been slowly improving in tournament results, the Gitz sadly have been doing the opposite, spiking harshly upwards in June of 2020 and falling drastically back down again in the following few months, where it's just remained to this day. Recently, however, the Broken Realms books brought about a few changes. Now these aren't specifically changes for Gitz, but are changes for Gitz at the same time. Let me try and explain. GW got the last bunch of Bad Moon Loonshine War Scrolls and squashed them all together, so while you get no new abilities, it is easy to work out what units you can bring back. There is a new allegiance called Grimscuttle Tribes, which is basically just a severe lack of arachnophobia army-wide. Cool if you're looking for something less varied as Troggoths, but straight up and down for players looking for a laugh. Glog's Mega Mob is another copy-paste from a White Dwarf, same as Grumscuttle. It's good if you like elite models and fancy armies over painting a gazillion tiny battle line. You can make your army more of an anvil with this allegiance, with some decent aftersaves and wound regeneration. In fact, if you are one of those players that gets sad over not being able to take Scraggot as your general, the command point regeneration ability of this allegiance kind of brushes some of the salt off that wound. Some, not all. Never all. Lastly, a 3rd White Dwarf special, Jaws of Mork allegiance. Of all the new Git sub-factions, this might be my favourite. This is mostly because Squigs are possibly the coolest, funniest model in all of Destruction, and I wants them all. Gitz players out there, I got you fam. You've got the goods to dish out the hurts on charges, and those charges are often more easier to make. So, step 1, buy all the Squigs. Step 2, Jaws of Mork. Step 3, repeat. Looking at this honestly though, it's just a bunch of copy-paste White Dwarf, which I'm sure is great for the 3 people around the world carrying physical copies of White Dwarfs with them to all their games, but doesn't do much for the Gitz themselves. There is a great need for a new or updated list of command abilities and traits for this army in my opinion, as well as a need to fix the clear lack of artifacts that have any tangible impact on this army in the current and future meta. With a new God of Destruction, I hope to see more changes for this army in the near future. However, the fact GW seem to have just thrown in old White Dwarf stuff so Gitz players can't say they got nothing, either means there is nothing coming up or something big is coming. Whichever you think mostly depends on whether your glass is half full or empty. As a realist, I say that the answer to this and any other questions you have on Gitz is more Squigs. After this is the Ironjawz and Orruks, which I will group together. Both have a 45% win rate, both teeter around the 2% popularity marks. However, you have an 11% chance to face Ironjawz at an event versus 4% on Orruks in general. The future is bright for Destruction, however, with the announcement of the new Cruel Boys coming in the Dominion box set, as well as Kragnos himself also being dropped. While Kragnos is currently the melee beast trapped inside the shooting meta, there could be big changes for him in the Destruction faction as a whole in 3rd edition. The boys hold top spots in D tier, but are still not the go-to choice for new players seeking a competitive advantage in tournaments. It's difficult because you will see games where their mechanics line up perfectly to table opponents, enjoying the smashing and bashing abilities, but this is both never a sure thing to hedge your bets on and quite one-dimensional as far as AOS armies go. Once you get up towards 2k in competitive lists, generals fare better packing it all into Great Waaagh, and going from there, which fares better in the meta even if your only tactic really is move forward and kill. The lack of shooting in a shooting meta also has held this army back in the past year somewhat. Getting into this army is easy enough to do for new and experienced players, but mastering it takes a surprisingly large amount of patience and practice and repetition. Players that do well with this army are often those that have played many of their casual games against like an A and an S tier army, which gets them very used to how to make up for the shortfalls of the army. Where these armies will land as individuals is anyone's guess at this point, but I'm leaning towards GW injecting some updates to them in 2022, if not end of 21. As we move into C tier, we start with Beasts of Chaos. 46% win rate in games, 1% popularity, and 8% chance of you facing them at a tourney. They have significantly risen in win rate since the middle of 2020, where they were sitting below the 35th percentile. Ungors, Bestigors, and Ungor Raiders are S tier units on their own, but as an entire army, Beasts have really struggled to make further headway in the tail half of GHB 20. Finding it very difficult to compete with popular armies such as IDK, Tzeentch, KO, and Seraphon. The new Broken Realm books brought about a few changes for them, however, that may help them end the GHB 20 era with a bang. Jabberslith got a little bit of a tuning up. The bloke has a save improved to a 4-up, which means that while he will still most certainly die, he might die a turn later. His aura ability was changed to hinder the enemy casters within range, which is okay. It is amusing because while it can boost an enemy's attack value, each time they roll a 1, they are damaging themselves. There was some weird change to its shooting as well, but nothing worth writing home about. They also got a new battalion that may or may not be valid in just over a month. While it is here though, it's making your Bulgor units a bit more reliable when dishing out hit rolls, which then actually makes them more likely to get picked for the team at lunch break, but then it really all depends on this one casting unit who now has one gigantic target painted all over his head, chest, base, anywhere else one can fit a target. But may just be worth it if you're confident in keeping the bugger alive. There was also several new battle traits which are not worth mentioning, so I'll save you the time. Using them is like walking on a treadmill. It gives you something to do, but you never actually go anywhere. Next army off the line, sitting comfy in C tier, is the Big Waaagh. 48% win rate, still not hitting a 3% popularity rating, with people having an 11% chance of facing them at a tourney. The Big Waaagh does better than the other destruction armies because, well, it's the Big Waaagh. Not enough data is available yet to see how Kragnos and friends will improve this army, if at all, and with a new faction coming, we are all waiting to see what happens next. This army has been a steady C tier force, but with the attention the Allegiance is currently getting, I wouldn't be too surprised to see some goodies coming its way soon. I'll be covering this one more closely in a faction focus after the new GHB drops, so keep an eye out. Flesh Eater Courts come in next for the C tier armies, which rose through the D tier very quickly into C back in July 2020, shooting up from a 25% win rate to a whopping 51% at one point, and settling in at 47%. They aren't the feck we know from glory days of old, but they still pack a punch and have some cool undead dragons to boot. To my knowledge, we haven't heard anything new about this army and what it will look like going into 3rd edition, which, well, it sucks. While the new Soulblight Gravelords has a dynasty in it similar to Flesh Eater Courts in its Avangori, it's far from related to this army at all, and I don't think that there's any chance of that new tome and army smudging this one out. I would expect a new tome in the distant horizon, but imagine it's also not GW's first priority. Watch this space. Next up, we have one of my favorites for no other reason than the fact it's where my free peoples ended up, and I do love me some gun lines. 48% win rate, 5% popularity, and you have a 25% chance of going up against a city's army at tourneys. Yep, Cities of Sigmar. Those are decent enough stats. The problem is that the win rate of this army, as the meta evolved, has been in a state of slow degradation to where we see it today. That said, if or when GW remove battle tome battalions from match play, there are many lists within this army's battle tome that won't give a single damn. Cities also made an appearance in Broken Realms, of course. A new home within the free cities, Excelsis, has popped up. Yes, Excelsis. At first I thought this was just a place for poor Conti to make spreadsheets and occasionally paint some Nurgle, but it turns out it's far more than that. To use it, you gotta be from Gur though. But in doing so, you're also accessing what could be some of the most kick-ass rules to hit this edition. And right at the end of it too, damn it. Firstly, the command traits Darkest Secrets and Cunning Foe in the right place are available to you. Of the two, Cunning is more of a trait you want for your general on Griffin, so he can retreat and charge while being harder for enemies to hit and hitting enemies easier simultaneously. Right place has a few words to it, but basically what you want this bad boy for is to be able to deploy exactly where your enemy really wishes you weren't, which also happens more often than not to be exactly where you want to be. On the downside, this home city doesn't have a battalion though, so don't rock up to the party thinking you're about to drop old mate on a giant chicken with 90 of his handgun fanboys in one drop, cause nope. As a result, of the two, if you want to be competitive with this, I would suggest Cunning over Secrets any day of the week. There was some less than exciting spells that I could swear are just ideas pulled from the old world that was rejanked to fit into AOS, and one of them even already exists if you still have a battle mage on Griffin sitting around. Sure, it's harder to cast, but you can shoot it further, which can be a huge help. I could be disappointed that GW didn't come up with a bunch of new stuff, but I kind of get the feeling their energy is being put into other things at the moment, and of all the things in cities that need revamping, spell laws found in a niche city inside a lore book released before the whole new edition drops probably isn't the greatest of concerns for any of us to have. Looking at the battle traits, I smiled. Not that I play this army anymore, but I have friends that do, and this looks decently cool. The riposte? I don't know. The riposte command ability basically lets a unit nearby dish out mortals to its attackers on saves of 6. So that unit of guard you just plopped onto an objective are even less appealing to attack and try and move off the point when the enemy knows attacking them could mean losing a chunk of their own unit even before you've struck out. It also means that squishy units might now be a little safer on a point so long as a hero is nearby. You also get Gift of Prophecy once in every phase that a unit shoots, which in the case of some units is more than one phase. The gist of it is that you roll a dice, and on a 2-up, you're +1 to hit, while a 1 sees you at -1 to hit. Risk versus reward would see me taking this bet every time, as you can already have trouble hitting at times with many of the units in this army book. If you put this on handgunners sitting on a point with a hero nearby, let's say a unit of 20, they are +1 to hit from steady aim, getting you to 3s to hit, which makes you sad when it drops back down to a 4-up because the enemy unit has charged and they are now within 3 inches. Well, that's okay. Use stand and shoot, pop this ability to get that +1 to shoot back, so you're now on 3-up and shooting 20 rend -1, 2 damage shots into the enemy on their charge phase on 3s and 3s. The enemy then melee you, which hurts like hell because you have a 6-up save, but then those 6s you rolled in the save throws deal mortals back at the enemy unit before you shoot again with whatever survives. With the same bonuses, of course. There are other better examples as well, I'm sure, but this was just to give you an idea. It's handy. Artifacts. Well, one of them is playing out just not something I would think as a wise choice, while another is awful, and the third is okay. Long story short, and pause this here if you want to read in depth each of these, but Don't worry about Glimmering, definitely don't bother with Rockjaw, and maybe consider Griff Feather Charm for that general who has Cunning Foe to make him a lot harder to get off the table. All that said, I don't believe you'll be seeing this city taking podiums often or at all in Age of Sigmar in the current state, maybe not even the future state. City's also got a few new characters. Galen Vendenst with a better KD ratio than the 12-year-old who keeps 360 no-scope headshotting me in Call of Duty with a bolt-action sniper rifle. At 115 points, he isn't cheap in the current edition, but who knows what third will bring. While his lore is cool and so are some of the stats and abilities, his bang for buck ain't there. If you 100% knew your opponent was taking lots of demons or low wound wizards, then he moves from a no to a maybe. One day, I hope to pew a purple sun with this guy for just to see it done. Next was Dorelia Vendenst. Yep, same last name. That's because these two characters are actually coming out of the Golden City for a daddy-daughter date. And of the two, daughter tops daddy. Same cost and mostly same stats, but that crossbow. Deploy her carefully so as not to need to move her again. In doing so, when she targets your enemy's squishy casters and other heroes with that big ass crossbow of hers, she gets an extra attack and +1 to hit. So, 2 attacks, 2s and 3s, Rend -2, and 4 damage instead of 2. If both these get through, you're knocking off enemy heroes and casters each shooting phase. With a little mention of this to your opponent, you could see yourself zoning out large portions of the table with your opponent struggling to keep outside of 24 inches of this crossbow. Overall, the meta for this army isn't drastically changed by the introduction of this stuff, and it will be a good little while into 3rd edition before Cities players really start to find where they sit in the food chain. If I had to hazard a guess, I imagine they won't move much immediately, but most Cities players know this and are fine with it. Hell, they are here for the lols and the beer anyway, right? Moving on. Second to last in the bottom fat middle is Blades of Khorne. The juiced up gym junkies enjoy a 49% win rate in the current meta, lacking in popularity at 4% with an 18% chance you'll face these guys at a tourney. In July 2020, these guys dropped right down the ladder, then beefcaked their way back into the high 40th percentile win rate, where they remain currently. They actually have a decent battle tome as far as army building goes. Pick your flavour and follow the prompts to get a decent list to take to your local store. Let's not forget that beast of a model, Vargaroth the Scarred, and Skulllock the Skull Host of Khorne, but sadly you won't really see this in competitive scenes. It's 1,100 points and its War Scroll doesn't make it worth it at all. Most competitive lists run a mixture of Archaon, Old Faithful Bloodthirster of Unfettered Fury, with a Slaughter Priest and Bloodstoker for good measure. After all, those last two only cost 180 for both. A few small units of Blood Reavers, those cheap Untamed Beasts, and a War Shrine. Wrap it all up with a couple of Endless Spells and the Dark Feast Battalion and you're off. There are variants of this all over the interwebs, but that's the basic gist of it. Even with Archaon in there, this army still is fighting to drag itself out of C and into B, but just might not get there. At least not in this edition in GHB. Blades of Khorne didn't really show in the Broken Realm series, but it's safe to bet that these guys will see some kind of changes moving into the new edition sooner or later, but they may have to fight off Nurgle players who seem to be more vocal about the need for a new tome than Blades players are. I mean, Khorne players are happy either way, yeah? Win, lose, it makes no difference from where the blood flows, just that it flows. Would like to see this army lifted a tier in the next edition. Let me know what you think in the comments anyway. The last on our list for this episode is Slaves to Darkness, which somehow still sits in C tier, albeit at the top of it with a 50% win rate, 30% popularity, and 15% chance of being an opponent you'll face at a tourney. This army came out swinging in August last year and just didn't stop, rising up from D to top C tier off where it plateaued the past 4 or 5 months at 50% win rate, which is a 20% increase in just 6 months. If things were to stay the same, I don't think there would be much room to get any higher in the current meta. While the army has proven throughout GHB 20 to be a great way of showcasing some of the game's biggest and coolest models that enjoy some strong 2 OP at times buffs, allowing for units from multiple different Chaos factions for players who maybe like to get a bit loose with their playstyles,
The units you want have been kept at high price points, and even when you do squeeze them in, if one of them wanders off on the table, he is doomed out there by himself, which happens more often than some players care to admit when they're dealing with the multitude of moving parts this army has. Let's not forget the newest addition available to this army, Be'lakor. Could spice things up a bit. It's still too early in the meta to tell, but he will no doubt make a showing in lists. Good for the fan of micromanagement and fans of the other Chaos pantheons. Smart players will make good use of the S tier models within the army, Chaos Warriors, Chaos Marauders, Chaos Sorcerer Lords. Where this army will land in 3rd edition though is all up in the air at the moment, but it's done a great job in the past 12 months to achieve what it has in the current meta. So, that's it for this week. We'll be looking at how the upper, middle, and top tier armies have done in the next episode. Once again, if you've enjoyed my content, please do consider supporting me on Patreon. A link to that is in the video description below. Like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content. Lastly, it would be great if you could share this video with your friends and groups in your local community to help me grow. Let me know what your thoughts are on these armies and anything else you might like to add in the comment section below. Cheers everyone, Major out.